next we check out the Airborne tab. Airborne Specialization, not tab. Airborne Snipers. Interesting that they call them Airborne Snipers instead of Army Snipers like last time, if memory serves. So, the M210 is suppressed. And we just got like a box standard M4. Or you can fork out some money for an M107. Alright. And they can laze. Obviously they're airborne, so you can airdrop them. They're stealthy and they can see pretty far, which is good. And then we have the Humvee. Specifically, this is the Humvee with the spotting equipment. You can throw smoke on. You can attach them to Browning. And then you can attach the B-Kit armor, which removes the ability to be airdropped. This is probably the single one thing I would change in this game, if I could change anything in this game at all, is change it so that the B-Kit armor, that you could still airdrop it with the B-Kit armor. You can airdrop all the LAVs that the Marines have, even with their A2 armor packages. And those weigh like 3 times as much as a Humvee. Why can't you airdrop the Humvee with the armor package? It makes no sense. And the only way it would make sense is if there's if they somehow inserted some line in the lore or whatnot that says that the Humvee's suspension cannot withstand the shock of hitting the ground with the extra armor package. But they don't specify that. And that is very annoying. Humvee with an RWS. Oh yeah, we've got these. I can go with a minigun. Or Mark 19. Smoke launchers. The rage-inducing armor package. Here's the thing. The Humvee was never designed to be a frontline vehicle. It never was. So it just it just gets on my nerves. Another criticism I'll make about the Airborne Specialization is that you don't have any armored transport aside from the armor package for the Humvee, like what the Russians have. I still think, and I know I've been on about this point, but I honestly do think that just the Airborne and the Striker Specialization should just have been put together. At least give the Strikers to the Airborne. Because the idea of mobility between the Strikers and the Airborne is kind of the same. It's the same concept, and that's what they were originally going to do, but they decided to split them off into their own specializations. And then you can make a US support specialization that focused on, I don't know, stuff. we have the MQ-1C, the Gray Eagle. And apparently the front landing gear is not actually touching the ground. Someone must have balanced this aircraft very, very well. So 2 anti-tank. Well, those aren't technically the anti-tank missiles. They're the. I mean, they could be used as it, but. Eh. Or you have the 4 Griffins as an option. And honestly, using this thing. As a sort of combination. You basically using this thing to hunt down infiltrators sounds interesting. Especially if you want to kit it out like this and then just give it a lot of missiles that it can be used to try and find special forces that are trying to sneak behind your lines. Or something like this if you want to give it, for some reason, if you want to give it air-to-air missiles. I'm not sure why, but okay. Well, that's interesting. That just makes the text stand out more. So they made this, I think, slightly more cost efficient. And then they just made this more expensive. Like 50% more expensive. So. To be fair. Oh, and they nerfed the view range. It was like 6,500. Now it's 5,500. That's a... That kind of sucks. Ah, I take it that's based off of the MQ or the MQ4. The Navy's version of the RQ4, the MQ4C Triton, I think. That kind of sucks that they nerfed that. There's nowhere, like, the vision gap then between this and the other one isn't nearly as extreme. And then you have the Airborne. And they have an option for next generation weapons like the M7. Oh, which does get a nice range boost. And the Moz. Okay, so yeah, that might actually be worth it compared to standard, which is just the M4, the M249, and the... Yeah. That might actually be worth it. Give them things like the M7s and the M250s. An HMG team with a pair of M2 Brownings. So. The Mark 19 team with a pair of, well, Mark 19s. Stinger team with a pair of Stingers. TOW 2A team with a TOW launcher. And you can go for the TOW 2B. And then you also have the weapons team with 2 javelins, interestingly enough. That sounds like it might be an armored vehicles nightmare. And 2 M240s. And then we have the vehicle tab. You got your standard Humvee with an M240, which you can leave it unarmed, or Browning, or grenade launcher, and then the violence-inducing armor package, or lack thereof. One thing that I kind of would suggest to give the Airborne an airdroppable armored vehicle is to take a version of the M1117, because there was a version of that kitted out as a APC that could, I believe, hold like 8 people, and then put that in here as airdroppable with like the option of mounting a 50 cal or a 40 millimeter. It'd be fictional, yeah, but it'd at least give you something. And then this is basically just a Humvee with a tow. You can mount smoke to it. Sudden urge to do violence. Or TOW 2B. If you are so inclined. Or the M1301 ISV, because this thing has no armor at all, like whatsoever. And sure, you can throw a 50 cal on it. Cool. This is literally the only vehicle that can actually hold like the weapon squad and the airborne. Then you have the Sheridan. And it honestly doesn't look like anything has changed here from the November beta. Unfortunately, the Sheridan can't swim, which kind of sucks. But that's about the only downside I can think of. If the Sheridan could swim, that would offer some interesting synergy with the Marines. Especially if you wanted to airdrop things like the LAVs, which, again, can also swim. And then you have the M8. Oh, they made the 120 more expensive, I see. Okay. And yep, they just generally made everything here slightly more expensive by virtue of making the 120 slightly more expensive. Oh, and they nerfed the armor, the heat protection on the reactive armor. It's only 300 from the front. and 250 from the sides instead of 450 on both, which is a pain. And then you have the active protection system. Make it 10 points more expensive. Support. We've got the Avenger. With a single Stinger pod. Like, you can't even have the smoke option here because it's just... Oh, it's so annoying. Or you can have 2 Stinger pods. This thing can fire on the move, which is nice. And you do have a machine gun. And then you have Brutus. Which, yes, this thing does actually exist, kind of. You have the option of up-arming it, and you can't airdrop it. Again, mutter, mutter, grumble, curse. Like, this thing doesn't even weigh as much as an LAV. You should be able to airdrop it. And then you've got smoke, just entirely smoke. Entirely HE, entirely cluster, or entirely guided, depending on what you want to use. You know, if you're running an Airborne Marine deck or Airborne Special Forces deck, this is literally the biggest gun you have. So. And honestly, I kind of like it. It's simple. It's a simplistic design. And then you have this, which, again, you can airdrop. Can't airdrop it if you go with that, but... well. Or you have the option for extended range rounds, which might not be a bad idea, but that's only like an extra 300 meters. So I'm not sure how useful it would be. Then again, you have a fairly cheap artillery piece that's only 90 points, or 80. That's still not bad. I think Brutus is like... it's also 80, but that's only if you want to use smoke. Kind of like that. Then you have the LMTV. Oh, so the bead kit armor package means this can't be airdropped now. You could mount the bead kit armor package last time and it could still be airdropped, I'm pretty darn sure. Yeah, it's airdroppable, and if I wanted to mount, that'd still make it airdroppable. Good grief. You know, I would happily eat that price cost if it meant this could be airdroppable. This is not airdroppable. There's no downside to putting the armor package on. Or the machine gun. Apparently it's airliftable, but I'm not sure how useful that is going to meaningfully be in practice. And then the slam ram, which is not airdroppable from the onset. AMRAM, which can engage missiles. And then you have 6 more AMRAMs. Or you can have some AIM-9s, which can also engage helicopters. And can be fired on the move, I think. Which would be pretty interesting if that's actually the case. I'm pretty sure these can be fired on the move. Again, that'd be kind of cool. It is a little bit steep, though, for what you get. Especially since it can't be airdropped. And then you have the AH-64 Apache, which is cheap. Or the Hellfires. 40, 30. Those are the anti-tank versions. Semi-active. Those things are going to eat armored vehicles for breakfast. And then you have the Apache longbow. AG-114L terminal guidance. Okay. Didn't the regular Hellfires have terminal guidance? No, those were semi-active. So you had to guide them in all the way. These are terminal guidance. I thought they were fire and forget. Yeah, they're described as fire and forget. Semi-active basically means that the launch platform has to keep telling the missile where to go all the way until the missile hits the target. Terminal guidance means that the launch platform has to keep telling the missile where to go up to a certain point at which the missile can identify the target by itself, and then automatically guide itself into the target, allowing the launch platform to do pretty much whatever. And then fire and forget is basically the same as terminal guidance, except the missile guides itself into the target for the duration of the flight. So the launch platform literally doesn't have to do anything except, well, launch it. I wonder if that's supposed to be a UI bug, because still, it's pretty weird. And then the Chinook. The giant markings on the side. OH-58. With a pair of GAU-21s. You know, I am genuinely surprised, for reasons I'm about to explain, I am genuinely surprised why this isn't in the recon tab. Get a pair of Hellfires. They're the good anti-armor kind. And it's this thing. Because you get a laser designator and very good view range. And you're stealthy. Well, relatively stealthy. By helicopter standards. So, yeah. You can't really be a cheap attack helicopter if you did that. And then you have the good old Blackhawk, the UH-60. Specifically, the M variant. And apparently that makes it blacker. Probably a joke in there I can't make. At least not on YouTube. Aircraft. We have the A-10. The A-10. With a 6 Mavericks, 2 Sidewinders, an ECM pod. Huh. Okay, cool. Like 6 minutes of loiter time, which I think is hilarious. Oh, there we go. Over there. I don't know why you need 4 Sidewinders, but that's apparently an option. Hydras, 13 500-pound bombs, 13 those, or you can have 5 of those, or 4 LJ dams, or 4 2,000-pound LJ dams. Good grief, you can turn this thing into a... Well, I mean, it's an A-10. Well, what am I saying? It's an A-10. Of course you can turn this thing into a ground attack nightmare. Don't want a designation pod in there, and it's only 400 points. You don't strictly need a destination pod. Although these can be laser guided. But they are fire and forget. The gun is the gun. So. You then have a B-1B. Six minutes of loiter time. JASM. And you can have a bunch of retarded bombs, because that's actually what they're called, retarded bombs. They have this fin kit on the back that slows their fall so that the plane that's dropping them can actually leave the blast radius before the bombs go boom. And then we have 30 clusters. You know, because cluster munitions, I guess. 12 JSOs for the same cost. Which I'm guessing are... These bombs don't have a range anymore. And then you have just 24 2,000 pounders in case you just really wanted to mess up someone's day. And just didn't care about anything fancy like guidance kits or any of that other stuff. You just wanted to dump high explosives on an area. And then you have 8 ALCMs, which granted pack a solid warhead and are decently accurate, I think. They don't have a, they don't have a dispersion, which is annoying. Or should you should you so desire, you also have the option for the localized second sunrise. Right here. The canned sunrise, rather. Oh, I kind of like that. Let's go with something a little bit less apocalyptic, like the cruise missiles here. Oh, that's a nice paint scheme. If I'm gonna be honest, one thing I kind of wish that they added was the B1R. A B1B Lancer, but with only 8 minutes of loader time instead of 10. That is much faster and can carry air-to-air missiles externally. But could get, like, nuclear bomb levels expensive if you really kitted it out. I think that'd be kind of fun. And then you have the C-130J30, I guess. Just like that. I think that's the same as on the Marine Corps C-130. The C-17 for all of your transport needs, I guess. Those wheels are not lined up. That's gonna set off my OCD. That's kind of nice. Wow, that's white. That almost looks like the an AN224 style, or not AN224, IL-76 style paint job. And that looks even more like an IL-76 style paint job. So they made this slightly cheaper, which I suppose could be interesting if you wanted to, although if you really wanted to make things as cheap as possible, you could get it down to 190. I don't know why you would, but you could. Hmm. 5 minutes of loiter time. 6 minutes of loiter time. You could turn the thing into a surprisingly useful air superiority platform. And then this thing with all of the cluster munitions from the looks of it. It's like 12. 4 minutes of loiter time. And the central line has been left empty. You do have GPS guided JDAMs as an option. Do have an option for a destination pod. This is actually not a bad setup. About the only thing I think I would change would maybe be some conventional bombs there, and then maybe something like that. For 425. Or 455. If you decided to do that. Go 450 if you want a destination pod, even if having one was strictly necessary because you don't have any ordnance that you can guide in. We have 15EX with drop tanks. 345 is pretty cheap, all things considered. Center line, empty. Although you do have JSOs. You get cruise missiles. Fuel tanks, harms. I'd go with something like that. And that's 380, which isn't bad for an aircraft with 6 minutes of loiter time. Okay, that's actually pretty solid. If I wanted to go this, that turns to 420 with 12 AMRAAMs and 4 AIM-9s. I can bring that up to 14 AMRAAMs and 2 AIM-9s. So, although this can engage helicopters, so maybe not. Centerline, designation pod. Is there really anything worth putting on the centerline? I suppose, like, these. But, again, is it worth it? It can be laser guided, which I suppose you can make an argument for the designation pod if you're going to do that, but that just feels like 55 points that I don't need to invest. I could throw JASM, air-launched cruise missile. Not entirely sure why I would need one, but I can do it. So, I could do something like that. Or, again, I could do something like that. Although with 6 minutes of loader time, I'm actually legitimately tempted to grab something like this. Because I don't know what the air traffic would be like. Even more AMRAAMs. Honestly, it's a bit annoying that you cannot mount harm on something like the A-10 or the F-15E. Then again, with 4 minutes of loiter time, you could have a setup like this. That could be kind of interesting. Although at 950 for a pair, that's going to be eating into your aircraft allotment quite a bit. Like, honestly, I would just love the option. Well, no, this is the F-15C, so it doesn't really make sense here. But I'd love the option of just having the wing pylons mount harms. Why can't I do that for this thing? It would legitimately be thematic. But, alas, I can't do that, and that is annoying. Okay, that looks weird. Alright, well, I guess the next one up is going to be the first new one. And that is the Striker Cav.